really literally nobody better we could have to express this than Scott Ritter, who is a veteran Marine Corps intelligence officer, former United Nations weapons inspector, and continues to be one of the most sought after military analysts in the business, but especially on the Russia-Ukraine war because of his extensive knowledge into the Russian military, into the Russian mindset, and to what's going on in Ukraine. Scott, welcome back to our show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, look, let's just get into the first part of this expansion. Ukraine is trying to expand the war deeper into Russia. This has been something going on for a bit of time now, to where, especially with Western intelligence aid, physical supplies, weapons, long-range missiles, drones, you name it, to help Ukraine fire deeper into Russia, and that by itself has been a problem. But here of late, the Ukraine side has spread into additional targets. And now they've been hitting an Amazon-type wild berries in Russia, and some pretty spectacular video that's been coming out of these. Makes a lot of great video and looks really, really bad. The Ukraine side has said, hey, this is not just an Amazon-type delivery service. This was a military process here, because they moved secretly hid military goods around. What can you tell us about, first of all, what is the objective here? What is Zelensky trying to accomplish by expanding into these targets, and why are they being successful hitting them?
Well, first of all, Ukraine has been losing the war with Russia for a significant period of time. Actually, one could say that they've lost the war the moment the war started. But thanks to billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars of Western financial assistance, military equipment, training, Ukraine's been able to prolong the agony of a nation. The nation being Ukraine. They've been actively working to disguise the fact that they don't have a solution to the military problem. Look, you remember June 2023, the great summer counteroffensive. I mean, hyped up. General Zelensky himself sold it to the public in December of 2022. Exactly what they were going to do: launch a massive attack using NATO trained forces, using NATO tactics to split the land bridge and to compel Russia into surrendering. Then they tried to hide it with a propaganda campaign where everybody was going, "Shh, don't talk about the offensive." Too late, and the offensive was slaughtered. You remember the imagery of M2 Bradleys and M1 Abrams and British tanks and the German Leopards burning on the battlefield as they were unable to penetrate Russian defenses. Since that time, Ukraine has been struggling to regain the imagination of the West, because only through capturing the imagination of the West can Ukraine continue to receive the largesse of the West. The West isn't going to give money and resources away to a lost cause. The West will only prop Ukraine up so long as Ukraine maintains the fiction that they are in this fight. Now, they'll be in this fight until the last Ukrainian, apparently, but, the bottom line is they're losing, and losing badly. So in January of this year, Zelensky replaced the Minister of Defense with somebody new, Mikhailo Fedorov. Fedorov, just to show you, he was the social media manager of Zelensky during his 2019 presidential campaign. Then he went on to be the first Minister of Digital Information. He helped create the e-portal used by the Ukrainian government. So he's a wordsmith. He's a propagandist. He's not a military leader. And yet he came in and spoke of innovation. He said, I will liberate Ukraine from the meat grinder of the front line, where General Syrskyi, the commander, was saying, I need more brigades. I need to fill in the gaps. I need to launch counterattacks to maintain his perception of Ukrainian victory. But it was costing Ukraine everything. They were running out of men. And so Fedorov went to Zelensky and said, we can do this differently. And this is something that was pushed by the West, using technology, drones, artificial intelligence to create the perception of Ukrainian victory. And this began the long-range sanctions, the long-range drone strikes into Russia. In May, Zelensky said, this is going to be the summer of the drone. I'm going to be launching 6,000 drones a month against Russia. And in June 25th, Zelensky announced a 40-day drone war against Russia. Straight up said, I am 40 days We're going to be blowing the hell out of Russia using long-range drones, the goal of which is to drive Russia to the negotiating table, to create a new reality. And then this long-range drone war became fodder for Western media, for the social media platforms that were sympathetic to Ukraine. You mentioned, videos of seeing things burning, smoke. Yes, they take a drone hitting a warehouse, setting the warehouse on fire, and they play that over and over and over and over again. They hit a refinery and get some smoke over and over and over again. A drone flying across the Russian sky over and over and over again, as if by replaying the same event over again, Ukraine's won the war. But this isn't what happened. You see, Ukraine is losing the war, and this became manifest on July 15th when Fedorov was fired. You see, you can only play videos so long, but the key thing to creating deterrence is to actually have something that prompts the other side to say, wait a minute. Ukraine is trying to create the perception of the ability to project pain. This is something that Thomas Schelling talks about in his war game theories. The ability to project pain, to bring pain to the enemy. Ukraine's not bringing pain to Russia. I mean, something's hurt. There's no doubt about it. I'm on very good terms with many of the people in the Donbass region, Zaporozhye, Kherson. I personally know the governor of Kherson. I've interviewed him. And we're being told that he's all but surrendering. Now, Gilbert Doctorow is professing that, the governor is somehow saying that Kherson is unlivable. Tell that to the people who live there every day, who continue to struggle, continue to live. There's no surrender here. This is just Western perception manufacturing. And on July 15th, the reality of what was happening in the front line, where the brigades didn't go to Syrskyi, hit home. And Syrskyi said, give me the brigades or we lose everything. Fedorov said, keep me giving the drones. I got this. But you don't have it because, you see, you tried to project pain to Russia. But all those little beautiful things burning, all it did is get Russia to project real pain to Ukraine. Ukraine is popping off an oil refinery capability here. Russia's destroying several factories here. Ukraine takes out a truck here. Russia destroys 100 UAV operators a day in Ukraine. Russia is projecting real pain on Ukraine, real pain, destroying the totality of Ukraine. And this is the reality. And Syrskyi's forces were being annihilated at the front line. He needed the brigades. So Zelensky fired Fedorov. Now, he replaced him with an intelligence service head who the next day or 2 days later, 3 days later, made the decision that they were going to expand the drone campaign, but not in an expensive way. They said, we're going to start striking wild berries. Why? Because they want to bring the pain home to the Russian people. And so now they start sending their drones and they hit some wild berries distribution centers. And man, they light up really good. There's a lot of cardboard boxes in there with nothing but civilian goods. The idea that wild berries being used as a military logistics front is a straight up fabrication of Western intelligence projected by Zelensky and echoed by social media and Western media platforms. Wild berries, I know it. Everybody knows it. It's an Amazon-like online retailer. And now he's blowing it up. What has this done? I mean, for a while, there's some imagery and people are going, my God, this has to hurt the Russians. There's some jobs that are lost. I mean, the pain is there. This isn't real pain. The real pain is what Russia's doing to Ukraine instead, because now Russia is taking out the totality of Ukraine's commercial enterprise. Warehouses, shopping centers, storage facilities, distribution centers are being hit. You take out one wild berry, Russia takes out 20 distribution centers. There will be nothing left of Ukraine's infrastructure when winter comes. Russia has destroyed Ukraine's ability to distribute goods. This means foods. This means clothing. This means everything. The Ukrainian people have been abandoned by their government and left at the mercy of a nation that can deliver real pain, which is Russia is doing right now. Russia, meanwhile, continues to destroy the totality of Ukraine's industrial infrastructure. Ukraine will be producing no drones by the time Russia's done. And Ukraine will be producing no power. Russia has destroyed power, the thermal power generating facilities, and they're destroying every gas station in Ukraine. They're starting at the front line. They're working their way backwards. By the time Russia's done, there will be no ability to distribute gas. The Ukrainians, they do clever things, like they strike the refinery in Samara. Um, and then they show that video, and it gets people like Gilbert Doctorow to, oh my God, they hit Samara. Yeah. And they know that Samara is run by, I think, Rosneft. And they know that Rosneft takes the refined product there and they deliver it to certain gas stations. And they know by hitting this refinery, Rosneft will have a disruption in deliveries. And so then they park themselves outside. They get some people to take videos of the cars lining up for gas. Well, there ain't no gas. Rosneft's ability to refine has been disrupted. But what they don't show is 3 days later. They don't show the fact that Rosneft is repairing this refinery. But in the meantime, the Russian government has gone to Lukoil, who has a reserve of gasoline, and said, redistribute it to the Rosneft gas stations. And there are no more gas lines. People are showing up and they're getting their gasoline on time, on target. That's the reality of Russia. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, there are no gas stations for people to line up to. No gas stations, no gas, no nothing, no life. This is the reality of what's going on. And it's a huge failure on the part of Zelensky. He's supposed to be setting himself up for the meeting tomorrow with Trump, or the meeting this week with Trump. I think he comes tomorrow for Graham's funeral, and then he meets with Trump, where he's going to be saying, give us everything, give us everything, give us everything. But Trump now has to acknowledge the fact that Ukraine has lost everything, that this war is not going well, that they're being destroyed on the front lines, and that this drone war that Ukraine is trying to use to create the perception of Ukrainian victory has backfired, and it's confronting the West with the inevitability of Ukraine's termination as a modern nation state. Winter will come. And when winter comes, there will be no heat. There will be no energy. There will be no water. There will be no food. There will be nothing in Ukraine. Ukraine laughed about how they drove Russia out of the Black Sea. Who's driven out of the Black Sea today? It ain't Russia. Russia has taken over the Black Sea, shutting down Odessa. And then if you listen to what Vladimir Putin has recently said, he recently said that there will be no Ukraine. He said maybe it's time to give Western Ukraine to the Poles, let the Romanians come in and take their land, and let Hungary come in and take their land. There will be no access to the sea because Odessa is a Russian city.
In fact, if I could ask you a little bit to expand on that a little bit, what has been going on in Odessa? Because it from what I saw, and you correct me if I'm wrong on the timing and sequencing here, but it looked like that Zelensky also, prior to all of this, expanded into the Sea of Azov and was hitting a lot of commercial Russian vessels that they call the so-called shadow fleet, but they were commercial vessels. And then Russia started striking back, and now it looks like that Russia, kind of to your point a second ago, that the Russian response has been a lot worse than the damage to Russia, and that the port of Odessa has effectively been shut down. Is that accurate?
Yeah, the Azov Sea, yes, the Ukrainians sent drones into the Sea of Azov, and they basically struck a number of ships. Ukraine, claimed that they were taking out dozens of ships. I think the real number struck is between 8 and 15, of which only a handful were seriously. Remember, Ukraine is striking with 60-kilogram, firecrackers. They come in and they go, that's it. You're not going to sink a ship with 60 kilograms of high explosive. You may punch a hole in it. You may cause some smoke. That's it. Russia's responding with 1,000 pounds of high explosive that goes boom. And Russia's now sinking ships in the Black Sea, shutting down ports. There is no port activity taking place in Odessa and Nikolaev. They're even moving up to close to Ismail near Romania. Russia's shutting it down. Ukraine is now complaining they can't get their grain to market. You shouldn't have started a war with Russia, striking Russian ships. Russia, this is the thing people don't understand. Russia has not been at war with Ukraine. Russia has treated Ukraine with kid gloves. They are focused on doing what they do at the front line, and they pay a heavy price for this, because as a result of Russia's kid glove treatment, Ukraine has built a safe zone in Ukraine and in Europe that allows them to sustain this conflict. Russia's been, we're not at war with Ukraine, so we're not going to treat Ukraine as a wartime target. But Ukraine has decided that they want to play stupid games. And when you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. So now Russia is at war with Ukraine, matching everything the Ukrainians do. The Black Sea is denied to Ukraine right now, functionally, and soon when Russia takes Odessa, permanently. This is the price you pay for stupidity. And Donald Trump is waking up to this reality. I mean, Marco Rubio had a meeting with Sergei Lavrov a few days ago, I think in Singapore, on the wings of the ASEAN meeting. And, he basically said that Anchorage is dead. We need new ideas. And the Russians are like, we got some new ideas for you. How How about we say we destroy everything, we occupy everything, and you get nothing? How's that for an idea? Because that's basically the idea that is there right now on the table. Some other things of interest are happening. One of the great propaganda campaigns that's going on right now is to try and replicate the intelligence services efforts in 2011 to cause Vladimir Putin a defeat in the parliament, denying United Russia its majority in an effort to derail Putin's prospects as president. Well, today we see the same thing. The effort now is to see if United Russia can be kicked out of the parliament or reduced in the parliament, loses its majority on September 20th. And in doing so, then create the conditions for the collapse of Vladimir Putin. I mean, past patterns repeat themselves, and the intelligence services activities in 2010, 2011 are playing out today. Same goals, same objectives. Vladimir Putin met with on Navy Day, and he met with sailors, and he also met with members of parliament. And he gave a speech where he told the parliament, would you like us to go faster? And they literally shout, yes. And he says, but to do this, there has to be changes, because so far we've been very moderate in what we're doing. We don't, any acceleration you speak of will not only cost lives, but will cost resources, will impact the economy. And the parliament said, yes. So there's a good chance that after the September election, and when United Russia cements its majority, that the parliament will be demanding the mobilization of 300 to 500,000 Russian soldiers. That's the number needed for Russia to take Odessa, to take Kharkov, to take Sumy, to end this conflict forever.
Wow, that's actually a big deal. I'd seen that mentioned in a number of publications here, that there was, in fact, I saw it in some Ukraine publications. It said Russia could mobilize up to 500,000 troops, but I wasn't sure if that was just because they've been accusing Russia of doing all kinds of things. But you say that is that something that's being discussed in open press on the Russian side, that potential?
Discussed in open press. Vladimir Putin said it.
Okay.
It's an open
That's
press.
different.
The president of Russia is basically saying, this is what we will do then. And the other interesting thing he did is he gave a presentation where, he said, I listen to everything. I don't just get official sources. I listen to, the bloggers. I listen to, the pundits. And he says, some of them get it right. Some of them get it very wrong, but I listen to everything, which again means that even though the Russian government isn't putting out certain thematics or narratives, Vladimir Putin is open to listening to ideas that resonate with him. And, look, there's just a certain reality. I just ask the people who hate on me, just look at a map. I mean, don't believe me. The hell with Scott Ritter. I mean, after all, I'm a Putin's puppet. Look at a map and draw a line on the map of where the front line is right now. Now imagine 700,000+ Russian soldiers populating the line of contact. All right? Because that's the number out there. Everybody acknowledges that's the number, plus or minus 10,000. Now imagine for a moment, project it out. Go through Kherson, through Nikolaev, up through Odessa to the border with Transnistria, which is what would happen if Russia was to take Odessa. Now look at that new frontage there. Just use basic military math. I'm just asking you to work with me here. It's not that hard. The extension of the front line, basic military math means in order to do that, you're going to need 300 to 500,000 additional troops. So this is what's happening, ladies and gentlemen. Vladimir Putin has said that Odessa is a Russian city. The consolidation of the line, once they take the rest of the Donbass, will extend up through Kharkov. It'll allow another couple 100,000 troops to be freed up for redistribution down south. This is the war that's happening around. The Ukrainian army is being eviscerated as we speak. They have no ability to replace them. There's no manpower left. There's no equipment left. There is no defense of Ukraine. Zelensky is begging for air defense because he has no air defense. But where's this air defense going to come from? The saving grace is supposed to be his ability to produce Patriot missiles under license. Even in peacetime conditions, he wouldn't get a single Patriot assembled for at least 2 to 4 years, probably 4. Under wartime, he will never get a Patriot assembled. There is no ability to give him additional Patriots. So, this is just the reality. People want to ignore it, but it's just the reality of what's going on. Ukraine has lost this war. When they finally surrender, I don't know, but they will surrender. It will be unconditional surrender. Ukraine had an opportunity to have a peace that would have preserved its integrity as a sovereign nation state. They've lost that opportunity because of Volodymyr Zelensky and his Western backers.
Gary, could I ask you to put that headline you had just up there a second ago that Putin was considering mobilizing 500,000 people? I want to put that up there because that's something you just said a second ago, but there was an additional comment in there. I'd like your view on what that means and how you interpret it. So, see, there we go. So Putin public, what's the word there? Public opinion plummets. But when you actually look at the approval rating, and this is the most recent one here, plummet is a relative term. The last one that's on the list here, and by the way, this is the same in both U.S. and Russian sources. Approval is 74%, disapproval is 21%. No Western leader has ever had that much. So if that's a plummet, I'm not sure what that's telling you, but that almost seems contradictory. If the public opinion was plummeting, that'd be the worst time to try and mobilize somebody. How do you view those two apparent claims?
First of all, there's no plummeting, as you said. I mean, this is a downward dip. If you put that chart back up, you'll see that President Putin's approval ratings are not a single straight line, that there are fluctuations. I mean, he's even gone down below that, and on some occasions, a lot of that's economic driven. The war has brought unprecedented levels of support, but now it's not that the Russian people are anti-war. It's just the opposite. People just aren't reading this right. The Russian people want this war to end with a complete and total, absolute Russian victory. They will accept nothing less than that. Nothing less than that. The reason why we have a dip here is because Vladimir Putin was embracing the Anchorage summit. He was embracing the potential of compromise, the 3+2 arrangement that was put on the table for Rubio. And the Russian people said, hell no. No way, pal. You don't send us to war. You don't sacrifice our sons. You don't sacrifice our husbands and then say compromise. There will be no compromise. And now Vladimir Putin, in perfect timing for the upcoming September elections, by the way, is saying maybe it's time for us to take the gloves off. They're doing it right now by blowing Ukraine to hell. And now he's telling the Duma shouted, mobilize. They shouted it, mobilize. And the president went, I hear you. Do you not understand what's happening? His approval rating is going to skyrocket on the eve of the September 20th elections. United Russia will sweep through this. All the any other party will be there and survive only by saying they support Vladimir Putin, and game, set, match. It's over. That's it.
Now, you mentioned some things that President Putin has said in the last couple of days. Tell me how you think this ties in with this dynamic you're seeing heading into September. I think it was yesterday. He said, listen, he's going back to how this started, like saying, hey, this is not our fault. We did not start this war. There is no aggression on the part of Russia. Now, many in the West think, well, that's absurd. Obviously, you invaded on February 24th, 2022. So, has he lost his mind? Is he senile, et cetera? But then this morning, I think, at least a video released this morning, President Putin put that into context, what he means when the war actually started, and it precedes 2014.
We have long faced illegal restrictions and attempts to restrain and pressure, both after the Russian spring of 2014 and before that. But since 2022, the West has launched a Russophobic machine at full speed. It simply sets world records on two criteria at once: on the number of so-called sanctions and on their uselessness, on the damage that these sanctions cause primarily to their authors and initiators, the peoples of some European and other states. I wish to shake the Russian state, to provoke a social split in our country. They have tried to strangle our economy, the financial system, the banking sector, to undermine the potential of science, industry, and education. Moreover, they do not have the strength to defeat Russia on the battlefield and are betting on frankly terrorist methods of fighting our people. But the people of Russia will never be broken. This has never happened and will never happen.
So he seems to be saying that I interpret this, and you're much better aligned than I am, that he's like speaking to these people that you just described a minute ago, whether it's the Duma or the people saying, no, don't back this down. It's like saying our cause is just because this started in 2014. Now, I would ask you to examine the rather radical difference in interpretation of these events. I don't think that Putin is trying to convince anybody in the West of anything, but he does seem to be trying to maybe not convince, but align with the view in the Russia that this is actually foisted on them from a long time in the past.
Well, first of all, it's actually a breath of fresh air to hear Vladimir Putin say this, because, there has been if you take a look, the West in the decade of the 90s, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the West went into Russia and basically sought to tear Russia apart. Don't take my word for it again, for all the Ritter haters out there. Go to the the man who ran political affairs in the U.S. Embassy in 1993, 1994. He published the second long telegram in 94, where he talks about how the United States is simply destroying any possibility of Russia functioning as a modern Western style democracy. We're destroying the institutions of democracy by blindly supporting a brutal dictator named Boris Yeltsin. Wait a minute, Yeltsin wasn't a dictator. October 1993, tanks in the streets, going to war against the parliament. Dictator, dude. He certainly wasn't a democratically elected president. The United States bought his reelection. We bragged about it on a Time magazine cover. And he, the author of this warned, I think his name was Mary, warned that the consequences will be a resurrection of Russian nationalism, which will manifest itself in a unique form of Russian governance, which will work for Russia, but won't be what we want. Well, guess what that was? That was called Vladimir Putin. Now, Bill Clinton didn't know what to do with Vladimir Putin when he first came in, because he sort of arrived on the scene. Nobody predicted this. We were going for our own horses. The CIA was funding. George W. Bush thought that he would look in Vladimir Putin's eyes and could see his soul. But this was he just didn't understand any aspect of this. But the real problem came in, because during that time, while Bush was looking at soul, Vladimir Putin was trying to make peace with the West. Wanted to become a partner for peace with NATO, wanted to join NATO. NATO said no. And so now we get Barack Obama. Barack Obama had an advisor named Michael McFaul. Michael McFaul's a Stanford professor today. He came in and he convinced Barack Obama that the way we being the United States, defeat Vladimir Putin is through regime change. And we began to promote a series of policies seeking to undermine Vladimir Putin and promote a replacement. In this case, Dmitry Medvedev was the replacement. It was just straight up open regime change. But at that time, and again, because you talked about, you just played Putin's speech. It doesn't come out of nowhere. Joe Biden, sound familiar, guys? At the time, he was the vice president of the United States, traveled to Russia in March of 2011 and held a meeting with the Russian opposition. I just want to say that Gilbert Doctorow identifies as a member of the Russian opposition during this time frame. I'm not making it up. He says it. And says to them, if you reelect Vladimir Putin, that'll be bad for Vladimir Putin and bad for you. That's a threat. He said, now we can offer you this hope. You keep somebody in like Medvedev, keep him in, and then we will bring in Western investors who will invest in you. But in order for you to receive the investments, you have to change everything. You have to change your total government. Basically, you have to go back to the 1990s and replicate the corrupt system that we dominated. And Vladimir Putin wouldn't accept that. The Russian people didn't accept that. They voted him in, and we've been resentful ever since. We've been seeking to remove Vladimir Putin from office since 2008, straight up. And Vladimir Putin now is acknowledging it. But prior to that, Putin had a problem because the West through the 90s had deeply invested itself in. I mean, hell, all the oligarchs got their money by robbing Russia and selling it for profit. That's how they made their money. If you say you're the aluminum king, you got it by stealing the aluminum from Russia and selling it to the West for billions of dollars. Russia wasn't generating cash. Russia was throwing away resources, selling them to the West at basement prices. And these oligarchs got rich off of the literal economic rape of Russia. And they became very powerful, very powerful. Vladimir Putin's been struggling against these oligarchs from the very moment he became president, but you can't undermine them without undermining the totality of the Russian economy. So it's a gradual process of confronting corruption in a gradual basis. But the West has always had its hooks in there. And in doing so, the West has always had the ability to potentially corrupt Russia from within. This is what Joe Biden tried to do in 2011. And this is what Vladimir Putin has accurately said is happening now, where voices are talking about the potential of economic engagement with the West, the ability of the West to come back within their resources. But look at what Scott Bessent and Donald Trump are offering the Russians. The same package Joe Biden was offering the Russians in 2011, the same package that the United States sold the Russians in the 1990s. Now, up until now, Vladimir Putin has kept open the possibility of having normalized relations with the United States and the West. The anchorage was the ultimate expression of that, because against the will of the Russian people, Vladimir Putin said, I will seek a compromise. I will try to bring this war to an end. I will try to keep the bridge open of relations, sound relations between Russia and the West. It now appears, and the Russians have finally woken up to this, the West has no intention of having peace with Russia.
Well, Scott, if I could just kind of pile on there, Vladimir Putin in that speech that we just played there talked about the Russophobia in the West, and if there was any more poignant and timely example of that over the weekend, here is the U.S. Senator, White House, kind of confirming what President Putin says.
I have faulted and will continue to fault Biden for indecision around Ukraine. I think they could have done more earlier. They always ended up coming to the right decision about javelins, about tanks, about funding, but always 6 months too late. And I think that was a grievous mistake. But it's nothing compared to Trump's taking the side of the war criminal aggressor Putin against the beleaguered Ukrainians, which is, I think, the most vile and amoral foreign policy decision I've seen in my lifetime.
Now, aside from the fact that Marco Rubio last month said that we picked a side and the side was Ukraine, I'm not sure what he's talking about, but you see this just visceral hatred of Russia. I mean, it just was saturated in his words there at the end. How can there be any kind of cooperation if that is one of your leading U.S. senators?
There can't be. And finally, Russia's waking up to this. There was a recognition in Russia that the American political system was infected with Russophobia. This is where, Sergei Lavrov said the Americans are agreement incapable, but there was always the hope that there could be some sort of gap, and that Trump as a businessman could gap over the deep state and the Russophobic attitude of the deep state and get engaged with American businesses. And this was the promise of the Alaska summit, to bring about a ceasefire and then bring about the investments that would, supercharge the Russian and American economies. But the Russians now have come to the realization that Anchorage was nothing more than a facade, a charade, to buy time to rearm Ukraine and get them to where they are today. And so the Russians now have totally abandoned, and to have Vladimir Putin. Look, I'm not going to say Vladimir Putin reads Scott Ritter, but what he wrote there is literally a word-for-word recitation of articles that I published last year and earlier this year, warning the Russians that you can't engage with the West because the West only seeks your destruction. And until the West changes its fundamental approach, the United States needs to change its declared strategy towards Russia. The strategic objectives of the United States is the defeat of Russia, the strategic defeat of Russia, which means not just defeating the military, but collapsing the economy, collapsing the society to remove Vladimir Putin from power. And now Vladimir Putin has articulated the understanding, the comprehension that is indeed the focus of the West. And so now he is once and for all driving a stake through the heart. This is absolutely necessary. There's a man named Andrei Ilnitsky. I would advise all of your listeners to go Google his name. He's a former retired lieutenant general, worked as a senior advisor to Sergei Shoigu. I've interviewed him several times, and I have deep respect for him. He has come up with a concept called mental war. And mental war is using ideas, false ideas, and planting them inside a society, and then germinating them through the echoing of false information. So it gets planted in the minds of people. People buy into a concept and they eat the society from within, causing its collapse. Mental warfare in Russia is done by people saying you can achieve greatness only through involvement of the West. You need Western capital to make your economy work. You need Western culture to make your society worthwhile. And they bring it in there. And then you get this echo chamber in Western social media that blasts in there, and it starts resonating inside Russia and tearing it down. Zelensky's been warning about this for a long time. And you see Dmitry Kirillov, the advisor to President Putin, talking about there's the potential of good relations. All we need is a tunnel between Alaska and Siberia. Everything will be great. And they send over Kushner and they send over Witkoff, who talk about the promise of, man, if you just give us all of your rare earth minerals, things will be good. And this is the kind of stupidity that people in Russia, the pro-Western people, have latched onto. Vladimir Putin just threw a stake through that heart of that vampire. That speech you just said is one of the most important speeches Vladimir Putin's given, and it'll be ignored in the West. And there he is, Andrei Zelensky. Guys, if you want to understand what I'm saying, read this man, listen to this man, because when you do, you'll get an insight into what the West is trying to do to Russia and why. Here in the West, we talk about the need. I've talked about all the time the need for debate, discussion, and dialogue. I have no problem with people with opposing point of views. I think if I disagree with an idea, come up with a better idea, debate it out, let the audience decide for themselves. But what's happening with mental warfare is it's not about a debate, dialogue, and discussion. It's about planting lies and then fermenting those lies and then letting those lies eat a society from within. And that's what's happening right now with this Western-based Russophobic propaganda.
Yeah, that's one of the things we're against. Gary, if you could put the link to that in the description below, that would be great, so people can go and actually watch that interview. One of which will probably be me. I want to shift gears here. We've been looking at basically the issues between the United States and Russia, and how that's impacting the war, et cetera. But as I said at the outset of this, Zelensky is expanding the war, not just by firing deeper into wild berries and that kind of economic targets in Russia, but he's actually expanding it geographically. As many people may be surprised by this, he struck an Iranian vessel in the Caspian Sea over the weekend, Tehran has accused Kiev of hostile criminal act. And in fact, Abbas Araghchi, the foreign minister from Iran, made this interesting statement here. He said that Zelensky has attacked an Iranian commercial vessel, killing a sailor. And he calls on the EU High Representative Kallas and Lavrov to make clear what the freeloader in Kiev did cannot go unanswered. So what in the heck is going on with Zelensky here that he's going to try and expand this by attacking? Well, actually, let me answer part of that question. Let me show you what Zelensky has said into why he's going here.
If Iran, from the first year of the war, gave new technology to Russia, it was Shahid drones. They gave thousands of these drones first year of the war. Then they gave licenses. What did they do? Did they attack us? I think yes. So they already did it. But we have to be honest. Iranians and North Koreans already attacked us.
Okay, so we're 4.5 years into this. Why did if he said in the first year of war, why did he just now attack and destroy, or at least attack and disable an Iranian commercial vessel for that justification?
Well, to be honest, I don't know if that was done deliberately, because initially the report was that they struck a Russian ship sending goods to Iran. So I think your Ukrainian intelligence actually got this one wrong. But then when it became apparent that it was an Iranian ship, Zelensky, remember who was giving that interview, Laura Loomer, who's, we'll just leave it at that. Sort of a self-parody, it's a self-parody of a journalist. Once it became, this is a man who's desperate to spin anything in a way that seemed positive. The United States right now is having an extraordinarily difficult time with Iran. Donald Trump had to cease hostilities at a moment when he's saying he was going to bring the hammer down because we're out of ammunition. And now there's a growing recognition that we've got nothing left. It's over. There's literally nothing we can do. And there's frustration. And so Zelensky is now basically hitting that button before he comes to talk to Trump. And he's good saying, look, Iran is a problem here too. We're doing you a favor, America. We hit an Iranian ship. I don't think he knew he was hitting an Iranian ship when they struck it, but now he's taking credit for it. And then he's throwing in North Korea. I mean, because there's rumors now, possibly true, that the North Koreans are going to provide up to 30,000 troops who are going to defend, part of the Russian borders. The North Korean troops do not fight in the Donbass, Zaporozhye, or Kherson. It's purely a Russian operation, but they'll come up and take a sector. They helped with the liberation of Kursk, and they'll now defend a sector, freeing up 30,000 Russian troops to come down and, do that thing we were talking about in Odessa. And so now he's going to be putting that marker out there too. This is just a sign of Zelensky's desperation. This is the same thing with Europe. Basically, declare a war on the world in order to, go down with the Ukrainian ship. Because, guys, the Ukraine is the Titanic. It's hit the iceberg. Ain't nothing going to save it. You can put the band on there. They can play all the music you want. You can have guys running around on top, and it looks good for a while. The ship's going down. How long it's going to take for it to sink, don't know. But I do know this. It's sinking, and it ain't going to recover. And Zelensky's trying to pretend that somehow we can patch the hole and keep the Titanic on course. We can't.
Does he think, though, that whether it was an accident or intentional, he certainly is now saying it's an intentional. So he says, yeah, they're at war with us. And so we sink that ship. Does he think that somehow that can spawn additional support for him, that somebody will say, well, let's do more for Ukraine? Because I can't really come up with a good reason why he would want to do that.
Again, I don't think that this was pre-planned, so I think we're seeing reaction here. And so it's reactive. So he's saying things that he think will resonate well with Trump. Iran provided weapons to Russia. Right now there's a Ukrainian theme of Russia providing weapons and intelligence to Iran to bring harm to America. I think Marco Rubio dispelled that. But, this is part of the Ukraine. This is a propaganda war. That's what people need to understand. We are in the midst of an information war where, things are being blown out of proportion. Anything that is sympathetic to the Russian cause, the reality of Russia, is suppressed. Anything that magnifies the potential of Ukrainian victory or the legitimacy of the Ukrainian cause is magnified. And so here we have a situation where, Iran did provide Shahed drone technology to the Russians when they needed it in 2022, 2023. Russia's licensed it. Zelensky's not wrong here. And now he's paying the price. And so he's trying to use this as a way of getting Donald Trump to have even more sympathy for Ukraine, to commit more resources. I think he's going to run into a brick wall. I'll just give you my prediction of what's going to happen. You remember the dressing down Zelensky got the last time he went to the White House? I think Zelensky's about to get slapped hard by Trump because Trump is not a stable man right now. One only has to look at the deal he did with Saudi Arabia. And we're talking about a 6-month negotiation to bring nuclear technology to Saudi Arabia, finally concluded. And then Donald Trump blows a fuse and says, none of this happens unless you agree to the Abrams Accords, which were never part of the negotiations. And the Saudis said, pound sand. I mean, so now that agreement's done. This is Donald Trump. He promised to license Patriot technology. Zelensky's going to come in and overplay his hand. And Donald Trump, I think, is going to snap, and I think you're going to see Zelensky get tossed out of the White House. That's my prediction.
Yeah, well, there's certainly some history there. I want to go down a path of one other thing you said regarding the Iran war. You talked about our problem with ammunition and how that has been expended during the war and what we have left to continue prosecuting the war. And the other thing you mentioned about the propaganda war. It turns out that some of the victims of the targets maybe of this propaganda war are the American people. Here is Mike Waltz over the weekend trying to dismiss that. Gary, let's play the one here. It's called Waltz Weapons.
A lot of stockpiles were depleted, not only from what we gave Ukraine over the last however many years, 4 or 5 years, and the administration inherited a depleted situation from not only Ukraine, but also the ongoing fight with the Houthis under the Biden administration and a depleted military under the Biden administration. So they have decided, they're going to new types of munitions, cheaper munitions, new technologies, but also with these new defense budgets, rebuilding our great military. Clear. The U.S. military, and I've verified this every which way, has everything that it needs to conduct this campaign as effectively as it needs to be. And I have to tell you, the people that are leaking this nonsense deserve to be in jail.
Okay, so apparently, I guess that's Vice President Vance and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane, who I guess he need to be in jail because they are definitely saying there's some big issues here. So what do we need to make of what apparently the Vice President and the Chairman are saying, vice what Ambassador Waltz is saying regarding how much ammunition we have to keep fighting?
Well, remember, Waltz is the public face. He's not a policymaker. He's the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. So his job is to serve as a sounding board for American policy to project it into the international community. One of the ways that you, again, we come back to, Thomas Schelling's war game theory, the ability to, project pain. That if you have that ability to project pain, it brings with you a certain deterrence value because people say, I don't want that pain projected onto me. So I am now deterred. And Mike Waltz's job is to, basically use the perception of American power in this international forum to bully nations into compliance. This is his job. That's all his job is. He's literally a mafia strong-arm man. He's going around, collecting the payouts from the various, bar owners and store owners. He's a thug. It's straight up thug. But it's hard to be a thug when suddenly it turns out that because the thug's only good if people think that the big boys are coming through to break your neck. As long as you're afraid of the big boys, you're going to pay the payout. But now Waltz is confronted with the fact that there are no big boys. There's a bunch of old men with bad knees, arthritis in the hands, limp along, torn rotator cuff, and nobody's afraid of these people anymore. America's been shown to just be this empty shell of a power. We can't beat Iran. Let's just let that sink in for a second. We can't beat Iran. Not only that, Iran is beating us. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we're losing this war. We lost this war. Iran hits us hard. We're blowing up empty buildings. We don't know what we're hitting at all. And we don't have the ability to go deep anymore. We used all that in the first 39 days of conflict. We didn't suddenly magically wave a magic wand and have all of our defense industry wake up and go, we're going to produce a whole bunch more missiles in a very short period of time. We're producing nothing, ladies and gentlemen. The money that's been allocated hasn't reached there. We aren't increasing our production yet. We may down the road, but it'll take years for this to happen.
Yeah,
years for this to happen. Meanwhile, Donald Trump re-engaged saying, I want more intense conflict. It hasn't been more intense. It was more intense the first 39 days. Why? We don't have the ammunition. Nothing. And here you are. Look at the time it takes, 64 months to build an SM-3 missile, but we've blown through 2/3 of our SM-3. THAAD, 80% of the THAAD missiles are gone. 53 months. SM-6, JASSMs, Tomahawks. We only had 90 of these precision strike munitions. It takes 46 months. We had 90. We used 80. We got 10 left. Guys, it's over. We have no ammunition. What we're using are HIMARS and ATACMS missiles on Kuwait, Bahrain, and the UAE to strike targets along the coastline. And that creates a perception of power. We use these JDAMs, which is basically the joint, the standoff bombs, but they're not powered. So that your airplanes have to go high, drop, satellite guides them in on the target. Well, one of the problems with JDAMs is they get jammed. I mean, people go look at what the Russians are doing to the JDAMs by the Ukrainians. They're jammed, they get shot down, all that. We're not hitting anything. And what we go in with deep, we're bombing empty buildings. We don't know what we're striking, and we're just burning through ammunition. And Donald Trump said, I really want to put the pressure up. And the military came to him and said, we can't. We don't have anything left. And if we continue this, we'll be totally defenseless right now. All of our air defense is stripped away. And the Iranians have ballistic missiles that will never end. And right now they're doing a lot of harm to us. They're taking out hangars that they shouldn't be taking out, but they're taking them out. And if we continue this war, they'll take out all of the hangars. We'll have nothing left. We've lost this war, so we stopped the war. Now, he hasn't declared a formal cease. We just stopped bombing. And now the Iranians went out and said, well, you stop bombing, we'll stop our missiles. So there's a ceasefire that isn't a ceasefire. And this is the reality right now. We can't win this war. Now, So Waltz is out there saying these things. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Trump is being briefed on the reality by J.D. Vance, by General Kane, by others. And there are people who are leaking this to the press. And here I agree with Waltz. And look, I believe in the free press. Absolutely. It's our responsibility as journalists to speak openly. And if we gain access to information, I mean, we use our own due diligence to say, are we bringing true harm to the country? But as the New York Times, in the New York Times versus the United States decided during the Pentagon Papers case, they said that the government can't hide lies behind a wall of secrecy. And that's the responsibility of the press to expose these lies so the American people can make a decision, especially when the consequences of the lies are American soldiers dying in a foreign land. Literally, that's what that Supreme Court case was all about. And so we have this responsibility to do this. So yes, if I receive information that says we're running out of ammunition and we have the president trying to promote a war contingent upon the availability of ammunition, that puts American lives at risk in a foreign land. We have a duty and responsibility to bring this to the American people so they can act accordingly. That's our job. But if I'm in government and I signed a non-disclosure agreement and I have a class, I'm not allowed to leak it to the press. And so I do agree with Mike Waltz. The people who leak this to the press, they need to be found out and prosecuted, or else there's no reason to have secrecy. So he's not wrong there, but thankfully there are people who have the courage to call out lies when they do. And it's someday, I think, not now, but someday the judiciary will recognize the intent of that Supreme Court finding, New York Times versus United States. When the government is using secrets to hide the truth, and the consequences of this is dead American soldiers.
Right, that's one of the things that
you have a responsibility to talk about it, and it isn't a crime, therefore, to leak this information. I think we need to get to that point.
Yeah, 100% agree with you on that. And then the last few minutes here we have, I'd like your real quick take on, there was before Senator Graham suddenly passed away from whatever source. So we're not going to worry about that at the moment. But obviously we used to have him on here a lot with his crazy statements, and we'd have that weird, here comes the crazy statement, whatever. Well, that's over. So he's gone now. But there was a group that was in the middle of doing a documentary on him. They released some of that before they released the whole thing here. And I thought this one clip here was really interesting because it shows the mentality almost of like children that were playing at war and not serious statesmen trying to find it into a war and a benefit to our country. Watch it.
President Trump, when he gets into the zone, he listens, he asks good questions, no tweeting. He hadn't tweeted much at all, no drama. He's been a great wartime president. I said last night that Trump and Bibi are like Roosevelt and Churchill. I mean, they're the right two guys to confront this evil.
Roosevelt and Churchill, what say you?
First of all, I think we need to be honest and open here. These weren't spontaneous comments made by perfume princess in charge, the former perfume princess, Lindsey Graham, who I openly despise and will always despise. There's a documentary film crew there. He's saying this for posterity. He's saying this, and this is carefully scripted. They can shut off the camera until he gets his act together and whatever. He knows what he's saying here. This is part of the Lindsey Graham propaganda machine that he's been propagating for some time now. Understand the open hypocrisy of this man, because on occasion, Lindsey Graham could be articulate and say things that were honest, such as Donald Trump is a liar, the worst man in the world who should never be president of the United States. He said that back in 2016. Now, nothing's changed about Donald Trump, except the fact that now Lindsey Graham finds Donald Trump convenient to promote his warmongering policies that, just, it can make me sick to my stomach as somebody, this is a man who was, using Iwo Jima as an excuse to invade Karg Island. I'm like, well, wait a minute, Lindsey, sort of a Marine thing. We made a decision in the 1980s to stop building memorials to dead Marines, that we thought maybe it'd be better to fight smarter, maneuver warfare, things of that nature. And whatever happened to diplomacy? This is a man who has never been in armed combat in his life. He's a lawyer who's been there. He went to Afghanistan, stayed in an air-conditioned office, never got near the fighting, that wouldn't know. He would puke if blood had splattered on his boots or his uniform. And he's out there promoting the death of people. the death of people. He's the most disgusting human being in the world. And if there's a place in hell for him, I hope he's roasting there right now like the fat, overstuffed pig that he is. And I apologize, but I despise the man. He is responsible for the deaths of millions of people. Moreover, he's responsible for the death of America. If the Americans don't understand that we are dead, read the Constitution and understand what's happening in this country right now. Look at everything that's happening in its totality. We no longer function as a constitutional republic. And a large reason out of the policies that have been espoused and promoted by Lindsey Graham since he became a U.S. Senator in 2003.